Welcome back to the Top Notch Documentaries YouTube channel. In today's episode of the serial killer series, I'm going to be covering the as yet unsolved case of the serial killer dubbed the Little Rock Slasher. I hope you enjoy. Like something out of Whitechapel, London, this murderer's crimes involved the use of a knife, brutal excessive stabbing and the targeting of victims in the early morning hours. The killer bears connections to the infamous Jack the Ripper, and for this reason he goes by another nickname that is currently circulating. He is also known as the River City Ripper. This unidentified serial killer's first known murder occurred in the early morning hours of August 24, 2020 in Little Rock, Arkansas. Larry Mcchristian, aged 64, was discovered by a member of the public, found deceased in someone's yard. The unknown killer had murdered Larry with a knife, and upon stabbing him, police would reveal that the killer had returned to his body, proceeding to stab him even more as he lay dying on the ground. The crime seemed personal just given the amount of stab wounds, and something like this pointed to the possibility that the victim might have known their killer, and this might mean that the case could soon be resolved. However, months would pass with no leads as to who had murdered Larry. A $10,000 reward leading to the apprehension and conviction of the killer was offered. Just under a month later, on September 23rd of 2020, another seemingly random murder scene would be discovered. It was in the early morning hours that a friend of the victim, and the victim was identified as Jeff Welch, aged 62, would call police to state they had come across his friend, deceased in front of his own house. Jeff had puncture wounds on his neck and it was clear that he'd been stabbed to death. The use of knives for crimes, especially like these, is extremely rare in Arkansas, let alone in the United States. Most homicides tend to involve the use of firearms, and despite the rise of homicides in Arkansas in 2020, these ones stood out. They were random crimes of violence, resulting in murder. The killer had been partially caught on home surveillance video in Larry's murder. He was a black male and he was wearing gloves. It would seem that the Little Rock Slasher was going out in the early morning hours to troll for victims, and he wasn't going to halt anytime soon. 2021 would roll around and police would be no closer to figuring out who their killer was. The two previous murders bore similarities, but it would not be until the attempted murder of Deborah Walker, aged 42, that police would have to come to the reality that this crime was linked to the two unsolved cases. April 11th was the date that Deborah Walker was ambushed in the early morning hours by a black male who, having approached her, just began stabbing her repeatedly. For some reason, whether spooked by a passerby or convinced that she would not live, he fled, having stabbed her a total of 15 times. Upon being hospitalised and queried about the attacker, Deborah informed police that he was a black male, 6 feet tall, and was slender in frame. The killer had failed in taking Deborah's life, and so, like Jack the Ripper, he ended up seeking out a new victim not long after, 27 hours to be precise. Marlon Franklin, aged 40, was found murdered on the street. He was a homeless man in the area. Police would voice their concerns that an active serial killer was present in the area in April of 2021 at a press conference, not long after the attempted murder of Deborah and the murder of Marlon. All the crimes were now connected, and they were perpetrated by the same offender, and he was an obvious threat to the community. Police increased their presence in the community as the crimes all took place in a relatively small area of Little Rock. Residents were and still are on high alert, and going out in the early morning hours is not advisable given the active serial killer threat. Based on the crimes, it is guaranteed that the Little Rock Slasher is comfortable with the area and knows the streets well. He is thought to live and or work in the community, and reward money is still being offered for information, leading to his arrest and conviction. Since the final attack in April of 2021, the killer has seemingly ceased his murders, and it's unclear if he has fled the area or is just waiting for media and police attention to die down before resuming this grisly spree. Could this killer strike in the near future? If you know anything about serial killers, then you know that they can go dormant for years, but never truly cease in their activities until they're dead or in prison. The case of the Little Rock Slasher is something that can hopefully be resolved sooner rather than later. The case actually caused a local masked vigilante named Shadow Vision, who has acted as a protector of the people in Arkansas for a decade, to appear on the scene. He or she wears full body armour and has vowed to stop the killer. Shadow Vision has claimed to have already exterminated 2 serial killers in the past, and the community seems supportive of Shadow Vision's efforts. Will Shadow Vision put the katana-like swords to good use and rid the community of the killer before the police can catch him? I guess we'll wait and see. This has been the Serial Killer series and the case of the Little Rock Slasher. As always, thank you for watching.